I'll let you operate the machine. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and call this meeting together, or order of the House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee. We're here today to look at one bill. Before we get started, I'd like to call upon Representative Anderson to lead us in a word of prayer to get us started here and ask the Lord for his blessings on the meeting.
If y'all will, bow with me, please. Dear kind and Heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, for the blessings you've given us, God. We thank you for allowing us to live in this great state of Georgia. God, we ask for your guidance, your leadership, and your discernment, God, as we take forth to do the work of the people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, I want to call upon Representative Kelly to present I think a substitute to House Bill 300. And if you would, I would just ask you to make your presentation ever how you want to, obviously, but if you would at some point kind of actually take us through the bill. Mm-hmm. I think it's an important issue for the state and for the entities that put these in, and also, of course, for the landowners for who the property is procured in whatever way that it's procured for those purposes. So if you would present the bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity you give me to work on this issue. Is something that we kind of got started on last session. It's an important, I think you've alluded earlier today and in this meeting, it's an important issue for our state of Georgia as we continue to have a balanced mix of power in our ever-growing state, and recognizing the role that solar will play in that, but also recognizing that should when the leases run out in these solar agreements, as we know they could 20, 30 years down the road, that we also have some safeguards in place so that the land will be returned to its state before the solar farms were established. But we wanted to stay pretty broad in how we allow landowners to work with our solar suppliers. It's working pretty well right now, and we don't want to disrupt that, but we do want to, again, put some safeguards in place, and I'll be glad to walk through the bill. The main piece of this, I want to say thank you to the people who worked on this and all season with me. We had a working group that had a couple meetings, had multiple conversations with the Public Service Commission and Commissioner Jason Shaw over there. So appreciate his input there. What we really feel like the whole key to this is having some form of financial assurance as part of the solar power agreements, so that the solar power providers, when they will guarantee to the landowner that they will have the opportunity with a bond or other financial means at the end of the day, if they don't take the land back to its original condition, that financial assurance is there. So let me walk through the bill. Starting again, Section 1 on line 13, you get our definitions. And Mr. Chairman, I know we were going to have a conversation about this today. I've gotten a couple pieces of input over the last maybe 24, 48 hours, still trying to fine tune some of the areas of language, and when I hit those, I want to highlight those. So starting on line 15 is where we start our first definition, commercial operations date. And this was there was a concern raised by the PSC to me on this front. We modeled this legislation after a Texas model that's working real well out in Texas, and but some things that we do different. So specifically looking on line 16, it says that the commercial operations date means the date on which the solar power facility agreement is certified by the commission. We've recognized through the process that we don't actually have the PSC certify these agreements, and so we're going to need to make a tweak to that definition. Kind of a policy concern that I'd like input from this committee and those testifying today would be, should that commercial operations date, should that commence when the agreement is signed or when they're actually functionally generating power? move on down through our definitions. I'd like to stop again at line 20, the definition of financial assurance. I've gotten some feedback from Representative Chaz Cannon, who's worked a lot in this space as his role in county manager, and me and him are working together on maybe just a tweaked definition of what financial assurance means right there, and I'm in the process of finishing that, so that's something I anticipate changing. We'll move through to the end of the definition. And when you get to line 52, which I think is really the next big component here, and that's where it talks about the grantee, the entity responsible for putting up the solar power facilities, that those individuals shall be responsible for removing the solar power facilities from the landowner's property upon the termination of the lease, and it describes how that property should be returned. So that's the request, and that runs all the way down through line 98 with some timelines. And then starting on line 99, section 46.3, 69.1 is where we talk about the financial assurance being part of the solar power facility agreement, and then the amount that the financial assurance should be and how that's calculated. Mr. Chairman, that's a large part of the bill. We've heard through a lot of testimony, both during the working group and working with parties. I feel like we're fairly close to having something that will continue moving our state in the right direction in terms of having solar as a strong piece of our energy mix, while also protecting our landowners and the beautiful landscape that is that we all appreciate when calling Georgia home, and industry representatives who are supportive of this model that's been used in Texas and other states successfully as well. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Okay. If you can keep it track, tell me so I know who comes up. We do have some questions. Looks like Representative Frazier, you recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kelly, could you go back to line 15, initially where you started? And is it just known that this is supposed to be the PFC when you say by the commission?
Yes, given just the overall chapter and title that we're in, and but specifically, we've started with some language that's used in Texas, and so their equivalent of our PSC is what the Texas language was modeling there, and this is just an area where we had it tweaked to put in the appropriate Georgia language.
I'll follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So your opening statement was to verify that. So would it be upon the certification of the commission, or is that something you say you wanted to look into revising?
No, the PSC does not certify any of these agreements
So
today. That's through conversations that I had as of about 24 hours ago with the Public Service Commission. They've had a lot of input on this legislation, and so they do not currently certify any of these solar power facility agreements. Most of these agreements are just simple contracts and leases through a landowner and then one of the companies that generate the energy that is then typically sold either to an EMC or to Georgia Power. And so they do not certify those agreements at the PSC level in Georgia like they do in Texas. I think we can tweak that definition of the commercial operations date to either be the date of which the agreement was signed or when they first begin generating power, and I think that's something I'm wanting input from this committee and our individuals testifying.
So we agree to change that now?
that is something that as I move towards the next sub that I'll present to this committee, that will be changed. It won't be
Okay.
certified by the commission.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
And it's and I think I think it would read something like either commercial operations date means the date on which the solar power facility agreement is signed, or commercial operations date means the date on which the solar power facility begins generating power.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Representative Koya.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to ask two questions. One, you said line 20 was going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what it's going to change to?
I was going to put in some additional language that we're considering that defines when you're talking about a financial assurance, you're talking about a bond or a surety, a surety bond, that some specifics about the ratings of those bond companies. Just to make sure that if you're purchasing the bond and 20 years later you've purchased that bond in a reputable company that's still going to be able to hold if there's a claim made.
Okay. Secondly, from your presentation, you had input from the PSC.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any from the solar industry?
There was a lot with the solar industry, and I think you're going to hear from a lot of them today too, talking about how this path that we're on through legislation like this not only continues to help make Georgia an attractive place for solar generation, but also helping sure that we protect our landowners. But I think you're going to hear largely overwhelming support from the solar industry.
And finally, this is great, but who has responsibility to make sure that it is done as stipulated? Is that PSC or just between the solar company and the landowner?
I think you can hear from some of the industry representatives that are here today, but there's sometimes some of the individuals who are ultimately buying the power require these agreements in any part of their contracting process. If you want to do business with them, there's really two models here. The EMCs largely work with a company who buys the land and then puts the solar panels on, and so there's not a lot of lease impact when you're talking about electricity being generated through our EMCs, because they're the landowner and they're the solar the facility operator, but they put all the equipment, the panels on themselves. They own the land and they do that. I think you'll largely hear from Georgia Power that what they do is they purchase the power from a solar power facility that has leased land from a landowner, and so you've got but Georgia Power, as part of the bid project for Georgia Power, they require you to have one of these types of agreements in place.
Thank you.
Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Kelly, you kind of started answering part of my question, because this measure, at the end of the day, is to avoid environmental problems down the road.
That's correct.
So, and this is a huge first step, obviously, where there's a lease situation. But I guess my question goes to how would it preclude somebody owning the land in some LLC and just collapsing the LLC, walking away from it, and leaving an environmental nightmare through a backdoor methodology where they own the land?
There should be some just general EPD oversight when it comes through any pollution aspect. This is largely making sure that a landowner has an ability to make sure their property gets returned based on the lessor.
Just a follow-up question. I mean, again, I love where this is going, but you just always look for the bad actors in any scenario. And I could see a case where a bad actor would own the land in an LLC, take all the lease payments all these years, but up front they say, hey, we don't worry about it. We don't need a bond. We don't care about your financial guarantee. And I guess that would be more applicable, maybe smaller operators, obviously not the large players represented in this room. I just wonder, if we're buttoning it up, I'd love to see, make sure that we close the door on any bad behavior,
Yeah, no,
including by the property owner.
I appreciate
if that is an exposure.
I appreciate that suggestion. It's something I'll certainly keep in mind as we continue to perfect the bill.
But good bill.
Thank you.
Representative or Chairman Workhauser.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Kelly, for working on this. It's a really big issue down in my area. Like a lot of leases, they can be bought and sold. And so in those cases, does that carry forward? And then I guess the bond would be returned and then a new bond security set up, or is that already in there?
Yeah, let me find exactly where that's at.
So you're already ahead of me. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Good job. And again, I appreciate you working on it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Chair has a couple of questions. So, is there anything in here, I was looking through, I didn't see it, but is there anything that defines the size? Is there any particular size of a solar installation or anything that identifies the kind of installation that's actually addressed in this legislation?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let's see. So this, I think Representative Williamson, that's where he was going with it, but these are the ones that are owned by, actually put in by a company that is contracting with a landowner. And it puts the liability back on that company to make everything back. I mean, there's a lot of detail in there about what they have to do to get it back to the way it was before. Now, the bill started out providing for a trust fund of sorts. That's not in here at all.
It's not. We've had goods and bads with our trust funds at our state level, and sometimes how those get funded or otherwise. But we thought that, I look at it, a little bit like having a renter make sure they give you a adequate security deposit.
Right.
And that's kind of how we looked at the financial assurance, is making sure that ultimately the grantee has a strong surety and bond in place that would cover any cost to return that land to it. And I think we'll hear maybe from some other individuals here who will talk about, how the land changes once these are installed and maybe what it takes to return those back.
Well, I appreciate the bill, but this bill actually is protecting a landowner, but which is good. But we haven't done anything in this one to necessarily protect when it's owned by the company. It's actually owned by the company. There's nothing in here that says what they need to do when the life of the solar farm is over. Is that right?
Well, when you think about an individual that owns the land and owns the equipment, their operation would stop, I guess, at the moment they no longer had one of those contracts to supply the power. Or, if they've got an operation working and they have one of these contracts to supply the power to the EMC, then I would imagine if it continued to be profitable and we continue to invest in solar the way we are, and there continues to be the high demand on energy in Georgia like it has been and continues to grow, that those individuals will want to keep those contracts with the EMC to continue supplying of power, maybe have to upgrade the equipment in 25 or 30 years as the market creates better and more efficient, or the land at some point has a value in the market to where it'd be more profitable to turn it into something else versus a solar farm.
Well, and the chair certainly doesn't want to be argumentative with a fine member of the committee, but I'm just thinking that those same arguments could be made though for the land that's another company goes in and contracts to lease property. I mean, when that life of that solar field is over, is done apparently. I mean, I'm sure there's things that can be done to continue production of electricity there. I don't know. I mean, I appreciate what you've done. I'm just trying to think, what else maybe needs to be looked at.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may not have learned a lot up here in 12 years, but I know one thing: when the chairman's asking you a question, you take heed to it. And And I certainly am.
Well, no, I'm just trying, I just want to make sure that I just want to make sure that we as a committee understand what this does, and if there's anything, I know that you have some ideas of things you want to maybe change in the bill, but, the bill actually, and I appreciate your work on it, I know you worked hard on it, but of course it comes from the committee.
That's right.
And we're the ones, the committee actually makes the recommendation one way or the other and decides to go with it, and if it goes forward and becomes, enacted, we want to make sure that we've done everything that, we need to be done. It looks like as far as for the landowner, from what I'm reading here, it does a lot to protect the landowner, and that's important. I'm just thinking of, personally, I'm just thinking of these big, solar farms that are along the interstates where people see every day when you drive by. I'm not even sure, I'm sure they're different, they fall into different categories of who owns them and so forth, but, I mean, I would rather see myself, I'm glad they're producing electricity, first of all. I think it's great. As far as the what you see, I would rather see corn or soybeans or cotton or whatever, but they look okay. But when they're how long a solar farm lasts, I'm not even sure how long they will last, but once they are coming up to their end of life, and if there's nothing going to be done with them to continue, I just see they could be extremely ugly. They're sitting there as they decay and die and rust, and so I think that's something that needs to be looked at too. I mean, not necessarily in your bill, but I'm just saying in general. I think that that's something. I think, is there another question?
Can I jump into
Yes,
to that real quick, Mr. Chairman?
absolutely.
Because I will say, also one of the partners we've had throughout this conversation is our cities and counties, and a lot of the counties that that have these solar installations located, they have some pretty tight ordinances that deal with maybe different times fencing and other things. I know working with Representative Cannon and talking to him, the county where he's county manager has a very robust county ordinance, and I believe he's wanting to start some conversations too about maybe what a statewide ordinance of something like that would look for. But I would also say that the risk of the property being left there to decay or just sit there, there is salvage value in the materials that make up these solar panels, and that is one incentive to get them back off that property. It's to get the scrap metal for the metal and the glass and the other things that make up these solar panels. I mean, they're not cheap. They're expensive piece of equipment, and they do have a salvage value. So that is something that gives me some peace of mind in terms of, all we can speak of is today.
Right.
I don't know what they'll be worth 20 years from now, but as of today, they have a fairly, substantial salvage value.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have one more question, then we have a question over here. I guess for now anyway, my question is there anything in the legislation, and there probably is, but it's just asking, is there anything that actually differentiates these solar fields or solar farms or what do you want to call them from a rooftop solar? It's still these third-party agreements are actually between a third party and an individual on his house or business or whatever. Is there anything that would differentiate that as far as protection of that homeowner, for example?
No,
And
sir,
I don't
Mr.
know that
Chairman.
there should be. I'm just asking if there is. I mean, how do we know that this actually applies just to the big solar farms?
Well, largely where where you're seeing these type of agreements being in place are the larger properties, but it's certainly not my intention to capture any of the rooftop stuff.
Okay. Well, I know it's not. I didn't think it was your intention. I just wondered if there's anything in there that actually. That's why I asked you to begin with about the size. What exactly?
Yes, sir.
What sets the size? But okay, just questions in my mind.
Yes, sir. Great ones. Thank
Chairman
you, Mr.
Dickey, you had a question, I think.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have a question. I think most of my concerns have been already raised by the chairman and Chairman Williamson. I just think, end of the day, this is a great bill. I thank you for working on it. It's really very much needed. But I just think not only the landowner needs assurance, I think the community, kind of like what Bill here was saying, I think the whole community needs assurance in some state policy here that facility will be cleaned up, will be at the end of its life. And so I just hope it's very clear in the financial ability to do that is readily accessible without going through lengthy lawsuits to get it or that type of thing. So thank you for doing that. And one last thing, thank you for using the term solar power facility and not the word farm in there. So they're not growing any food or fiber for anybody. I'm happy that they're generating electricity, but they're not a farm. So thank you for staying away from that terminology.
Well, I appreciate your noticing that in the bill. I know I've slipped up and said it once or twice today, but so I hope I'm still allowed to stop in Musella for some peach ice cream when I'm coming down that way, even with my slip ups today.
Representative Okoye, did you have one more question?
Just half a question. Half. So,
I'll give you half an answer.
I was just thinking, would having a trust fund be good for this proposal? Because when the bad actors leave without cleaning up, it can be assessed to clean up the site. So could you consider that? Thank you.
No, thank you, and that's something we've looked at. You know, again, we've learned some lessons from other trust funds that we've had at the state level, and hoping that money was there to clean up some of the problems that we thought they were going to be there for, and you know, not this legislature, but others may not have managed it maybe the best way, and so that's where we thought if we could take it out of the government managing that money to where they may grab it sometime for a use, that we would have a reputable company that could provide a bond, like bond rating, like bond issuance companies do for a multitude of other projects involving the state. Thank you for the question.
All right. I don't see any. Oh, Representative Montahan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick question about this, and that is the term commercial generation, that doesn't have anywhere in code where that determines the size of anything. That doesn't determine size in code. I don't know if that's a question for legislative council.
Well, I do appreciate that. I would. I'm just a dumb country lawyer. Maybe we can get legislative council to.
That's what I asked. I didn't know if there's a definition.
Well, maybe we need to get Nick over there to tag team me in on that one.
That give us a size on there. Let me ask a further question while he's doing that. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Indulging me, and that is, if somebody were to own, and maybe I'm less than a dumb country lawyer, I'm just a dumb country boy. So that's even worse. My question is this: what if somebody wholly owns the land, decides to make their own power facility, and they don't sign an agreement, and then they just up and leave the land, let it be condemned by the county, and they leave it? What process is there for those folks who maybe leave it to be condemned?
Well, one, I always say that local zoning and other things can always apply here. Two, I would always say that the land that's being used for these projects are generally pretty good land, flat land, and then three, there's pretty substantial salvage value for the equipment that they're putting on there, that all of those market forces, I think, would discourage someone from just walking away from land that they paid a substantial amount for and equipment that has a substantial salvage value.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just have concerns with energy generation. These things can vary widely. Things can change in a flippant moment. Somebody learns some type of new technology, and then all of a sudden solar is not profitable anymore. Someone who owns this land, and they wholly own in all rights and in every way the solar generation, then they would have right, with no agreement being made, to just walk away. I just want to make sure that's if they would not be encumbered by this.
I would say to you that again, I agree with you that we can see changing marketplaces, but I think what you're talking about with removing the equipment from the land generates income for them with the salvage value of the equipment.
Answer your question? Okay. I believe that's all the questions. We have a couple people signed up. If anybody, we just got two, so if anybody wants to speak, you need to let us know. And, Andrew Long, and when you come up, we just have the two, but we know you. But if you'll tell us who you are and who you're representing.
Of course. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to address you and members of the committee. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Andrew Long, A.R. Long Company. I am here today representing Georgia Solar. The only reason I'm speaking to number one, we are in support of HB 300. But we do have questions that were raised earlier about the size. And we are in favor of this legislation as long as behind the meter rooftop solar, residential and commercial, are excluded. Or we have the opportunity to be exempt from this. So that's simply the small business, the sort of mom and pop, the rooftop solar, that we are excluded. And I do understand, Chairman Kelly, that it was not your intention to include the small business, and we're glad to work with you on language that would identify that in HB 300.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Questions to Mr. Long?
I do have one. I mean, it's a friendly question.
Doesn't have to be friendly.
Chairman
you're
Williams,
right.
Chairman Williams has been kind of hard on me about asking questions earlier in Ways and Means, so I was just doing. So when you say mom and pop and you talk about behind the meter, there's some pretty large solar facilities that operate behind the meter. So I need you to help me define that. Not today, but
Okay.
as you work with it, because I mean there's some, quite frankly, almost utility size solar generation facilities that you would refer to as behind the meter, correct?
Well,
I mean,
for clarity, behind the meter means that the electricity generated is used at the location rather than sold to the utility.
I understand.
Yes,
I understand that, and I'm with you on that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, if you build a solar facility and it's 5 acres or 5,000 acres, and it's behind the meter, you use it for your project. It is just as much an issue of the land if that's not taken down properly than if you're leasing that to the utility, is it not? I understand we don't want to make you said mom and pop. If somebody puts solar on top of their house, they don't necessarily have to get a bond, right? Because I mean, that's their home. That's the value of their house if they don't take care of it. But I mean, I just help me understand the difference if we're trying to make sure from a community standpoint that it's put back to an environmentally conscious area.
Yep.
That the fact that it's behind the meter or not, or if they sell to the utility or not, matters about land cleanup. That's all. That's. I mean, I may be the
Yes.
only person worried about that, but I see the difference between when you said mom and pop and then you said behind the meter. Those aren't necessarily the same.
Okay.
They kind of go in a Venn diagram.
Okay.
That's not the right diagram, but they go into a diagram where there's a bit of an overlap, but they're not always the same. Venn diagram. Been out of college a couple of years.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, let me get back with Georgia Solar and get the proper language and come and see you about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You have something?
No, he just said he'd been out of college a few years. I said a few more than me, for sure.
Any more questions from members of the committee? I do have one comment, I guess. I might be willing to talk to the presenter of the bill about that if your organization would go over to the Senate and tell them how much you're in favor of, I think it was House Bill 71.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we are considering that legislation, and I will get with Georgia Solar and see you personally to see if we can go over to the Senate and do that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir,
My
Mr. Chairman,
friend.
thank you.
Appreciate you. Jeff Clark, with Advanced Power Alliance. But if you'll say it again, I'd appreciate it.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Jeffrey Clark. I'm president of the Advanced Power Alliance. Here on behalf of our organization, which represents renewable energy developers and also the other associations we collaborate with, including the Southern Renewable Energy Association. So appreciate the opportunity to be with you. We are supportive of this bill, continuing to work with the author and appreciative of his help and support along the way here. This addresses a concern that we know exists not only for landowners, but also for communities, as was mentioned, for local governments. And what we are trying to do as an industry, it's an issue that gives us concern because it gives landowners and communities pause when we explore the opportunity to do solar with them. This allows a landowner to benefit and a state to benefit from a cleaner, cheaper resource that industry wants to help grow the economy, to benefit from a diversified income, but at the same time to know that the local government will not be required to clean up that site at the end of life. I'll share with you some highlights from my own perspective, and I will try to be brief to take questions. This bill only includes utility scale projects, and I'm also not an attorney, or I'm not a country attorney or any attorney, but my reading is the 46362 in the utilities code, or the official code, makes a reference to rooftop and individual solar projects that are owned by a property owner. Those are exempted from this bill. So what we are talking about are utility scale solar projects that are built to connect with the electric grid and to serve the power needs of all Georgians. So number one, another issue that has come up, and I think is critical to this bill, this is the terms of this and the requirements of this bill are not waivable. A landowner cannot say to a developer, hey, why don't we set aside these requirements on decommissioning and these costs and you just pay me a little bit more up on the front? That's not a possibility. A landowner can't do that and a developer can't do that. And that gives some guarantee to the landowner, again, and the community. It restores the land in the definitions of what is required in decommissioning. It restores the land as close as possible to its original state, with a couple of exceptions that are at the landowner's discretion. And I've seen this with wind energy projects and solar projects, where landowners will often say that they'd like to have the roads, for example. If there were access roads built across a farm or a ranch, a lot of times they want to keep those in place. If they'd like to keep those, they are allowed to waive that. We want to clarify that in the bill, that there, with very few exceptions, that a landowner can keep that. But this requires that the land be returned to as close as possible its original state, including grading the land 3 feet below the surface, removing the electric cabling, removing the communications cabling, etc. There was a reference, I think a feature of this bill is that it does not create a trust fund that has the potential for mismanagement or other problems. It instead requires a financial assurance that is at the discretion of the landowner. A landowner, and I understand that the author will be working on tightening that language. We want, again, this to be, we want to make sure that no project is ever left for anyone to clean up other than the developer. But what this does, it allows discretion on the part of the landowner to some extent to guarantee that they have the financial assurance necessary to do this. But another feature is that it requires that a licensed engineer in the state of Georgia do an analysis to determine what those costs are, to make sure that that financial assurance is updated to guarantee that those costs are always reflect the salvage value, but also reflect the market costs of decommissioning those sites. Lastly, I will say that the one other feature of this, as you think about decommissioning, the projects again that we're talking about are utility scale projects. They're projects that are serving this state and this state's consumers on long-term power purchase agreements or contracts with the utility. And so these are not the type of projects. This is not similar to opening any other type of business where if the market changes, you might walk away. These are long-term guaranteed contracts. And so that feature of this type of industry also, I think, gives some assurance to landowners and to communities that these, because they have long-term contracts in place, the odds of someone walking away are near zero. So I think that also is important to reflect upon as we look at language that will solve this issue. And again, thank the author and the committee. And this is an issue, again, we see it as one that's important because the good operators in the industry do this already. This bill makes sure that there's never a situation where someone tries to do something less than what is the best standard. I'm happy to take questions.
I think you have a question, if you want to take it. Who is it? Chairman Martin.
Thank you. Just as a practical matter, when these things are going on, I know not all Georgia counties have zoning, but the ones that do, it's not uncommon for something that's going in and it requires a certain zoning to go in there for a city or a county to say, you've got to maintain, this project. Okay, I mean, you could have one where it's a large industrial area and they have to create a detention pond, and then they'll actually put some additional language that says in perpetuity you have to do that. There may be a bond that goes with it. If they don't, then so my question is, as we look through to this, and it has to suit the landowner, should it also, have to, it's what you were telling me, that it also sort of has to suit the governing authority as well, if that already is in place. Again, I know some counties don't have that kind of land use, and I'm not trying to suggest one size fits all, but because it would be for the greater good. I mean, everything from if you just leave it and you don't take care of it anymore, run off into the streams and so forth. So your kind of indication is that is already being done by the good actors, and it could be done without breaking the industry.
Carefully thought about, and I know this is obviously a consideration that the author looks at. This doesn't preempt any other local authority. This is, again, to raise the standard for every operator and to make sure that they all, again, meet those standards and guarantee that a landowner or a local taxpayer, and I can
doesn't get left holding
we
the
don't
bag.
ever want to have that happen, but it doesn't preempt any of the activities you described.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the members of the committee? I wanted to ask you, if I could, make sure the organization that you are with, does that organization only have solar companies that would contract with a landowner? I mean, do you have any organization of yours that actually own the land that they put the?
I'm not aware of any of, there may be an exception, but
Right.
I'm not aware, and we have over 50 members. I'm not aware of any that purchase land for projects. It's much more, most often it's much better just to contract with a landowner.
You probably wouldn't want to comment on whether you think that the ones who own the land, whether there should be anything. You probably wouldn't want to comment on whether you think the companies that own the land that they're putting the solar facilities on, whether there should be any requirements for them. This, which I'm very proud of the representative for this bill, I think it does really what you want to do. But I'm just thinking out kind of further on. But it appears that this bill does, for those companies that contract with the landowner, I mean, it sounds like it does exactly what needs to be done. However, I guess I'm thinking for the people of Georgia, for the state of Georgia, and land that is owned by a company that puts their own equipment on, it's their land. There's no requirements for them. I guess you wouldn't want to comment on that because you don't have any organizations like that in your.
I'd be happy to consult with those companies and help you find a solution. But
Okay.
right now, I'm not prepared to comment.
Okay. I'm going to call on John Watson. I think you had a.
Mr. Chairman, we did not sign up, but.
That's fine.
Impact Public Affairs representative.
If you come up, just so you be on, because it's on the.
John Watson, again, Impact Public Affairs, representing Silicon Ranch, and Ben Oberman of Silicon Ranch. Mr. Chairman, you asked a
Thank you,
question
sir.
of this gentleman. Yeah, get you out of the hot seat. You asked a question associated with, is there a model or is there a company that owns the property?
Right.
And Silicon Ranch owns the property.
Right.
And so at the cost of putting ourselves in the bullseye, I just wanted to make certain that we identified ourselves as someone with a slightly different business model and here to talk if necessary.
Well, I would like to ask, I don't see any other lights lit up right now. I would just like to ask, and I know that you can't necessarily speak for them. Maybe you can.
Yep.
What is your
He's a
position
good talker, Ben Oberman.
Yeah, Ben Oberman, I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Silicon Ranch.
Okay. I guess my question would be, and I know that they do a great job. I've been to the groundbreakings for a few of those facilities. But my question is, here again, as far as I think going back to questions that Chairman Digby had and some others, as far as these ones that are owned by the company that actually does the installation. I mean, do you think that there should be, if not these requirements, I mean, I know it's a different animal here, but I mean, do you think there should be some requirements to have a plan on file, or have some, have something on file, maybe with a PSC, that maybe nothing can be held, strictly by the book by, but how long you expect that facility to be in existence, what kind of steps that you would take when it does come to end, something that kind of puts into writing what would be planned to be done at the end of the life of a facility.
Sure, and it's a great question, and obviously from our point of view, we would like to be excluded from this, and as Representative Kelly has touched on, our view as land ownership is not to be a 30 or 40 year project, right? Our view is to be an 80, 120 year plus member of the community. Yeah. So when we look at these things, we're looking at a holistic approach of saying there's always going to be a need for energy, and I know that's been touched on here already, is the need for energy is not going to slow down. And as we've seen through recent IRP discussions and the new economic development advances in the state, there's a new push for energy that we believe will continue to maintain in the state. So our view is we are making these tens of millions of dollars of investment of purchasing the land in these communities to be long-term stewards, right? So therefore, when we get to the end of life from a PPA perspective, a purchase power agreement, whether it's with Georgia Power, co-ops, or MEAG, our view is we will take a look at that project, and because of the investments that we've already made on the land and the equipment aspect, we will then figure out how do we repower the facility. And that'll include replacement of panels, and I believe we talked about this previously at the special session of partnering with solar recycling companies to ensure that these products don't end up in landfills, and we'll buy and install new advanced equipment to maintain the capacity to continue to serve the customers throughout the entire state of Georgia. And as we kind of look at this, the initial investment in the transmission and the piles that are installed into the ground are going to continue to carry a massive investment to ensure that the needs of the consumers and the utilities, especially from a carbon-free perspective, are continued to be met for 30, 60, 90 years. So in all, while we are taking the 100-year approach to a lot of these facilities by making the investments, especially on the transmission side, we do work with the local officials and the county ordinances to supply decommissioning plans. I believe we sent one over to you in your office previously, and happy to share that with the committee itself to say, while we are taking a look at this from a holistic approach of long-term ownership, to where we do not plan at any means to be outside of moving outside of these contracts and these lands in the 30-year mark, we do have plans put in place to ensure that if this does come up, that we will be able to meet those requirements that the local officials have set.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, a fine point on it, a plan associated with what in a ending scenario that we do not anticipate. However, should that happen, a demonstration of a written plan as to how we would remove ourselves from that property and figure a way to change it into a higher and better use, since we are the owners, is perfectly fine, understandable. But as an owner, us bearing the cost, the embedded cost of a bond and the payment of surety for decommission that we never intend to do, we would be opposed to.
But I would have to comment, I don't think either of you are going to be in those same positions 90 or 100 years from now.
Hopefully not.
I don't think so. Okay, I appreciate that. Is there any questions that we have these? Representative Koya, I'm going to call on you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the name of your company again?
Silicon Ranch.
Silicon Ranch. I know that's a great company. This may not be for you, but I think we can consider having, and I know we don't like trust funds because of past experiences, but companies like yours may be required if possible, to pay into a trust fund, because not Silicon Ranch, but there could be an on-Silicon Ranch that may be a bad actor that can give the rest of you bad names. So if we have maybe a trust fund just for companies like them, not for everybody else. So that way, the community can be assured that you won't be leaving the land not returned to close to the original state.
Sure, and understood. And I think, you know, as this bill continues to develop, I know there's going to be some continued minor tweaks to it. As Representative Kelly touched on, we'd be happy to kind of continue that conversation about what's the best for the developers that are already active in the state, what the financial assurances that we already are making in these communities today, and you know how the tax dollars, especially from a land ownership perspective, are benefiting these communities. So I think we can kind of talk about all this collectively as this bill continues to be developed.
Senator Williamson, did you have a question?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier, but we're talking about cleanup costs and projected in the future. Is there any range of cleanup costs now, per price per acre?
There is. Unfortunately, I do not have that off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to get some of those data points for you and share that with the committee, and also provide some information about the salvage value that I know Representative Kelly has touched on, as well as the recycling component that we are one of the major investors in, one of the largest recycling companies, to ensure that these materials don't end up in landfills, as I know that's also a major concern. So when we think about all those things collectively, that will then ultimately change the equation. So I'll be happy to provide that information.
And just a follow-up question, if I may, sort of briefly, are we talking about a cement or concrete foundation for each one of these solar panels? I've never walked out.
No, absolutely not. So each pile is buried into the ground 6 to 8 feet, but it is into the natural foundation of the land itself. Now the transmission systems, the substation, that equipment, some of that is cement pads. Some of it's some rock and gravel. But from our perspective, no, absolutely not. It is natural grass grown, or native vegetation that we then manage on our side. And thinking about our collective view on O&M specifically is we do have quite a few sheep grazing on most of our facilities across the state that we're very proud of, and changing the dynamics of the O&M process.
Did that answer your question? It's two piers underneath.
So that's two steel piers that are going down deep enough to support the structure.
That's correct. And then grass or vegetation under the balance of the panel.
That answers my question. Only I was wondering if Chairman Dickey, chair of our agricultural committee, would still qualify the ranch aspects of this solar. Maybe he's giving you a pass. Did you say sheep or goats?
They're sheep. Yeah, we don't want them eating all the wires. So, and we are being sure to not call them solar farms, as we've been appropriately directed. So.
There's a breeding barn we'd like you to visit, Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you all. I appreciate you stepping up. We're just about right on schedule, but I do want to make sure, and these gentlemen already, I don't think anybody had any questions for them. So anyway, I'll recognize Representative Kelly again for closing remarks.
Mr. Chairman, if we're right on track, I don't want to throw us off. I again just want to appreciate your willingness to entertain this issue, to give me the opportunity to work on it in the off season. I appreciate the thoughtful questions from all the committee members and those who continue to work with us on making sure Georgia continues to move on a bright path with this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't know, to the committee members, I don't know what else we might have next week, but we'll meet, and if Representative Kelly asks and is ready, we'll meet again next week on this. I really do think it's a very important piece of legislation, an important issue. And here again, as far as these facilities where the land is leased, I think it does, from what I read, it does a really good job of addressing that. But, we had some questions, kind of looking further out and, in different other scenarios and everything. And that's what I I hope that we have from the committee, because, you know, when we, everybody has some different ideas, and you may have an idea that nobody else had thought about, or some questions. I just want to make sure that we got it really covered. And I appreciate all of you, and appreciate the questions that have been asked. So with that, if there are no other questions, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, too. Thank you.